Hi everybody, my name is Haley and welcome to my kitchen. Today I am going to be making some refrigerator pickles, and I thought I would turn the camera on and show you guys how I do it. I do want to preface this video by saying I have two very small children that are in my care right now, my children. But, so if you hear small voices or if I get distracted with something, I apologize. I gotta kind of work with what I got here. But we went out and harvested this morning. This is all cucumbers. So I have some work to do. I also have some dill. Now last year I made probably a dozen jars of refrigerator pickles that lasted us all year. Last year was the first year I made them, and when I was first looking at recipes and stuff, I was under the impression that they only really stayed good in the fridge for 3 to 4 months. I do not can, and I felt like a great way to preserve some of our harvest to eat throughout the year. Now we are in Minnesota, so our growing season is very short, and with that comes not a lot of fresh eating, and with my life the way it is right now, I don't have a whole lot of things that I use to preserve. I don't can, I freeze a lot of things, but we have a pretty non-exotic garden as well. So I just really like the idea that there was something that I could have into the winter. However, we actually made it all the way through into the spring with our refrigerator pickles. I just finally had to buy a jar of pickles from the store probably in June. Otherwise, the pickles got us all through the year. The last batch I pickled was in October. We did have a very mild fall, so that helped extend our season a little bit. But my experience so far has been that the refrigerator pickles have lasted upwards of 6 months. So actually it was probably closer to 8 months, to be honest. Yeah, about 8 months. So again, this is my personal experience. I use my discretion. They did change texture a little bit of flavor too, but they weren't rancid, they didn't go bad. I didn't get sick from them, so I felt comfortable enough to feed them to my family. So come along with me and I'll show you kind of how I do it. I've been doing it a little different each time, depending on what I had in the garden for dill. But this was the first, actually this is the second batch I made this year, I think. And they've been sitting in the fridge now for 3-4 days, and I tried one this morning and it was perfect. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing I did that time. Well, kind of. I don't have as many dill sprigs as I would have liked to, so I'm using some more dill flowers, but I'll get into all that. Let's get these cucumbers washed up, peeled up, cut up, and I will start stuffing the jars, and then I will go ahead and show you how I make my brine to pour on top of it. Let's get started. So I personally have only ever peeled cucumbers about every other. The pickles that are a little bit more thicker, they're gonna have a more bitter peel. So if you have a cucumber that's a little girthier than others, like see this one's fairly narrow, this would make a good pickle. But this one's a little wider, you see that? This one you might do better with, depending on your variation of cucumbers, you might want to take some thicker peels off, because that peel might be a little bit bitter. Another way you can avoid a bitter peel is, from my experience, when you harvest, make sure you're harvesting in the morning, so it has the best water content. If you can harvest when it's cooler out, like say today is, I think this morning when we harvested, it wasn't even 60 degrees outside yet. But if you have to harvest when it is warm out, take your cucumbers inside as soon as possible, get a bowl of very cold water, and just let them soak. let them soak for 30, 45 minutes. And that will help rehydrate them and take some of that bitterness out. When I make my cucumbers, my pickles, my refrigerated pickles, I usually make about 2 jars at a time, at least, depending on what I have to harvest. I'm gonna get a bowl for the chickens for this. Hold on. I'll kind of go through the brine process in a little bit here, but you can cut and prepare your cucumbers for your pickles however you would like. I personally just like doing regular chips. That's how we use them, like on burgers and stuff. My husband puts them on his sandwiches for work, but you can spear them. And honestly, I'm sure you could even harvest small muncher cucumbers and make just solid small pickles. I don't know how well the brine would penetrate full pickles like that. I have not personally done it with this recipe, but I am sure it would be just fine. You might just need to let them sit for a few extra days. The way I do my pickles, I'm trying to go slow here and chat at the same time. So my quote unquote recipe that I use, it calls for about 3 pickles per 32-ounce jar, but depending on the size of the pickle or the cucumbers, I usually get only about 2 in there. And my brine is supposed to fill a whole jar. That's another reason I make 2 jars at a time, is I usually have to make about 50% more of my brine for that. I'm gonna get a jar out and start filling jars since I have quite a bit here. So I'm gonna turn the camera off quick, grab a few jars, and we'll get started on filling the jars up. So in each jar, I have just these jars. I ideally would want a wide mouth jar, but I don't have any right now. They're all being used. So we're just gonna go with the narrow mouth, which is perfectly fine. For lids, I'm just using what they came with. I do, however, have some of these plastic tops that would fit on here. But again, they're all being used. So I need to get some more of these. I'll probably just use the small neck ones, jars, and then just get some more lids, because there's nothing wrong with that. It's just sometimes easier to stuff them and easier to take out of it if it's a wide mouth. But we're not actually canning, so I don't have to worry about the logistics of all of that. That's what I like about refrigerator pickles. You're not gonna make your family sick by doing this if you happen to do it wrong, which I'm a lot better, but 5 years ago this would have been so overwhelming I wouldn't even have thought about trying it. So first we're gonna start with mustard seed. I don't know if you can see that, just regular mustard seed. And you're gonna do a ½ tablespoon in each jar. I'll probably end up having to do more jars because I think this is probably only gonna use maybe 5 cucumbers, and I have about a dozen cucumbers left. So I'm just gonna start with this amount because my baby is about awake from his nap and I will need to get my children lunch here soon. So this video is probably going to be broken up throughout the day. What I am doing right now is another ½ tablespoon in each jar of black peppercorns, whole black peppercorns. So now that we got ½ tablespoon of mustard seed, ½ tablespoon of peppercorn in each, ideally what I would like Actually, I'm gonna do my garlic first. Hold on, I gotta get my cloves of garlic cut up. So I am using elephant garlic. That is what the store had. This recipe specifically that I'm using, I guess, calls for 3 cloves of garlic. Since these are larger, I'll probably use only 1 for each, maybe 1.5 or something. So you gotta peel this. All right, now I just cut the ends off, the main end that attaches. And with the regular cloves, if you just lay your knife flat and bust it open, that's all you need to do. You want to keep it whole. But since this is, I'm only using 1, and since this is elephant garlic, I just honestly dice it up like that into about 3 pieces and put it 1 in each jar. That way there's still some surface area covering, you know, there's more surface area of the garlic that's exposed that can get, this one was like a double. Nice. But you may do whatever you would like with that. I will warn against using, cut that off. I will warn against using minced garlic. I have tried that and it leaves a film on your top of your jar. So I would not use minced garlic. I don't think garlic salt would really work that well either. So just go ahead and use the straight cloves. I don't keep these on hand. I don't grow these. So this is something that I have to buy from the store. But sometimes there's the best way to do things. And thankfully you have me to tell you what does not work. So use the cloves. Like I said, usually you want to do about 3, but this elephant garlic is so big that this is more than enough to put in each jar. It looks like I'm going to need to get another head of garlic. Look at that massive one. Oh my gosh. I'm not going to use all of this in one. That's for sure. Oh my goodness. Maybe I'll split this extra up between, I'll just put these 2 in the last jar and split this up in between the rest of the jars. All right, now that that's taken care of, I'm gonna start. Actually, we're gonna do the dill next. Ideally, I would want, I just harvested this morning. So these are the dill flowers. And this is my first time using dill flowers in pickles. Last year when I ran out of dill sprigs, which when it gets hot you will. This is a dill sprig. Just the leaf of them. They're usually more flavorful. Last year when I ran out of dill sprigs, I just used dill seed. I waited until the flowers dried, and what produced on those little flowers was the seed, and I just used that. But I didn't really like the flavor. That flavor was a little bit more bitter. So this year, the last batch that I did, what I did is I kind of did equal parts dill sprig and equal parts flower. However, I don't have much for dill sprigs right now. Try to separate all these. There's not a whole lot of dill left out there in my garden. So I'm going to use mostly dill flowers, and I hope it still has good flavor. Ideally, you want about 5 to 7 big sprigs of dill. So instead of doing that, I'm going to put about 2 small sprigs in each jar. There's a fly on my camera. Hopefully he doesn't bother us. I'm going to do about 2 sprigs in each jar to keep them evened out as much as I can. And then I'm going to use dill flowers for the rest. I might have to go get more dill flowers later to throw in here, but I'll start with this. All right. And then I'm going to do as many dill heads as I have and equally disperse them between the jars. I'm probably going to need more dill flowers. I think the dill flowers are very pretty. I just do not think they give off as much flavor. Here's another dill sprig. Put that in there. So we've got 2 more in here. Another sprig. 1 more in here. Yeah, I'm gonna need to go out and get, that's not enough dill. Maybe I will take some so I can finish a jar. I'm gonna do about 5 head flowers and a couple sprigs in each jar, which means I will need to go out and get lots more from the garden. Alright, we'll do 2 jars to start. 2 jars is about 1 batch, so that's about what my dill is gonna look like. Again, the dill flowers were all right. They weren't bad. And now I'm gonna take my prepared cucumbers. This is just 2 cucumbers cut up. So we'll see how far that gets us in these jars. So as a recap, I know this is kind of all over the place. What happens when I try to hurry and do stuff. We have our peppercorn, we have our mustard seed, we have our clove of garlic, our dill, and just fill it up to the neck with cucumbers. Shove them down and pack them. So that was 2 cucumbers. Now I'm going to finish cutting up these. Might be enough, might need to do more. And if you're worried about, if it's like your first batch of cucumbers of the year and it's been really hot or your cucumbers have gotten too big, I highly suggest just taking a bite of your cucumber before you, looks like I'll need to cut up this one. Before you do all of this and potentially, got a little garden spot, just leave that out, give that to the chickens. Just sample your cucumbers before you make pickles is my suggestion. And make sure the ones, if you're gonna do them like this big cucumber, make sure they're the slicer version, because if you let the muncher style cucumbers get this big, they will definitely be bitter. So this one I'm actually gonna sample. And that is not bitter, so we are okay. Oh my goodness, that is good. Good cucumbers. I don't know if this is my Macklemore variety. I think that's the name of it. I keep calling it Macklemore variety of cucumbers on my garden tours, and I do not know if that is actually the name. I should probably look. All right, that one's filled all the way to the top too. These are probably gonna be lunch. All right, guys, so we have 2 stuffed jars to start. I am going to probably just cover these and put these in the fridge for now, and put the rest of the cucumbers in the fridge. I gotta get going on the kids' lunch. Do a little bit of a cleanup here. Later this afternoon or this evening, I will come back and make the brine. I won't make the brine without recording, so I can show you guys how I do that too. So we will see you guys in a few hours to finish this up. Hey everybody, I'm back. It's like 4 or 5 hours later. We won't talk about that. That's just how it goes in the house of small children. But we are on our second naps, so we'll get this. So the next step for all of this, and I usually get this going. I usually get this brine going as I'm like preparing the cucumbers and dill and all that stuff, just so it has time to get boiling. But since I knew I'd probably have to do this in a couple different parts, I just decided to wait until after to do all this. So since I have 2 jars that are ready to have brine in them, I am going to triple my batch. If you heard me say earlier, 1 batch of this brine isn't quite enough to fill, you know, the 32-ounce jars that I have. So I usually make 2 batches if I'm gonna do 2 jars and just pour the rest down the drain. But since I'm making 2 jars, I figured three batches of this brine would do a good amount. It's usually about 1.5 per jar. You can just do the 1 batch of brine and then top it off with either vinegar or water or a combination of the both, but I found that doesn't really do it justice. So I just do the extra brine and throw the rest. But yeah, so let's get going. So again, I'm tripling this brine recipe. So to start off with, I have 3 cups of water. And then in this container, I have 1.5 cups of white vinegar. And next is salt. And we'll just do, it's 1 teaspoon. I grabbed a teaspoon. I could have just done a tablespoon, I guess, but it's 1 teaspoon per brine batch. So I'm gonna wanna do 3 of these. It doesn't have to be approximate, or it doesn't have to be exact. Again, I could have just done a tablespoon, but and again, this is for my family, so I don't really care if my hair is completely up out of the way or anything like that. So total of a tablespoon in there. Alright, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna set this to as high. So you can do like medium high. I never do high on my pots and pans, so it's on medium. So this will take a little bit to get going. And then you wanna let this get to a simmer. And then once it's got a good simmer going, you wanna cut it off right away. You don't want to let it boil or cook. I like to give myself a little bit of grace here because I am notorious for forgetting about things on the stove, but I've never screwed it up. So Even if you let it get to a roar and boil for a minute, I don't know that it's gonna really do a whole lot of damage. But mix this salt and sugar in real good. And then once it's boiling, I'll take it off. And once you get your brine completely done, because after that it's done. After it's boiled and you've let it sit, it's done. But just let it sit on the stove for an hour or so. Let it really cool off to whatever temperature your jar is or as close to. Like my jars have been sitting in the fridge, so I'm gonna take those out now. But I'm gonna want this real cooled down before I pour it in the jars, because if you know anything about glass, you don't want to change the temperature like that. You do not want to get overly excited and pour a hot brine into your jar of pickles to have everything shatter. So remember, let it cool before you pour it in. I've only done that one time, and that was with my simple syrup, so it was an awful sticky mess that I will never ever do again. So please just let me be the lesson learner here. So like I said, after this is all done, it's all ready to go. Pour it over your pickles. I'm not going to record that part because it's probably going to be later and I probably won't get a chance to. Pour it over your pickles, and remember when I showed you the cucumbers were up to like the neckline? I like doing that, so when you pour this in, there's extra space to pour over it, so everything's covered well. My backyard chicken is catching my eye. I'm like, what is that? Oh, it's just Evelyn. I have a chicken living in my backyard. We have a fenced-in backyard, and we have 29 other birds outside, but she is in our backyard because she's been very sickly the last few weeks, and she's doing fine, but she doesn't like to live in the coop anymore, so now she's going to be living in our backyard because I don't want her to succumb to predator attack overnight. So we have a backyard chicken now. Anyways, so I'm going to let this go, and then when it's all cooled off in an hour or so, I'm going to pour it over my pickles, and I will have refrigerator pickles that will last me 7-8 months into next summer. So they won't survive that long. This early batch here will not survive that long. That'll be a September, October batch that will get us through. But if you have any questions, let me know. There's so many different things you can do with this. It's a very simple recipe. It's a very simple brine. I have a bunch of great Marconi peppers in my garden right now that when they're ready, I have thought about cutting those up and pickling them. You could pickle green beans. You can pickle anything. Not very exotic. I'm just going to stick to my pickles. So this is a super simple refrigerator pickle recipe. You don't need a canner. You don't need anything crazy for this. So I hope this was helpful, informational, enjoyable. But yeah, we'll see you next time.